I've started the recording. Does it show up, Mike, that I'm doing the recording?
Yes, it does.
It doesn't really give me any indication, but hi, everyone, and thanks for coming to our webinar. My name is Cynthia Tipaldos, and I organize these webinars. And we're the North San Joaquin Valley CNPS. This is our 8th webinar event. We hold them on Mondays. Of course, today is Monday, May 8th. And we now have a website, which I put here. We just launched our website if you want to go find out more about us. Tonight, our speaker is Rhonda Allen, and I'll be giving a quick bio of her later on. And of course, the topic is the fantastically gorgeous La Loma, California Native Plant Garden. I'd like to actually ask people to put in the chat if you've actually been to the garden, and if you know, just say yes if you have been.
Yes, that would be nice to know.
Our agenda is pretty simple. So I just do a few minutes here of, getting started about our overview of our webinar series. And then Mike, who's our membership chairman, he'll talk about our chapter. And then I'll do a brief intro of our speaker, who's Rhonda Allen. And just so you all know that this event is being recorded and all of our webinars are uploaded to our YouTube channel. And you can watch our Facebook page and our website and our newsletter for the announcements of the next webinars. We've had quite a few already. Obviously, you can't write all this down, but everything's recorded. You can go and see it, and it's all on our website and in our YouTube channel, the ones we've had before. So you can just glance and see what they are. It's kind of a mix. It's mainly things that I'm interested in, and I know the speakers, so I know they'll do a good job. But if you have something that you want to talk about, you just let me know. So today is, first of all, Loma, California Native Plant Garden. And then the ones coming up, and all of these are now scheduled, except, well, they're all scheduled. And you can actually register for them now. And through the newsletter has links to all the registration. And pretty soon they'll be up on the cnps.org/events and on our website. But next one coming up after this is landscape design. Then we have bryophyte basics. And if you wonder what bryophytes are, we'll come to that. It's fascinating. After that, native plants of the San Luis National Wildlife Refuge, and also especially the benefits to wildlife, including the tule elk. And I heard this Madeline speak before. It's fascinating. September 11th isn't set yet. I do have someone I'm hoping to snag, and we'll let you know about that. Then October is native plants and our native fish. And then November 13th, in time for the holidays, is creating wreaths with native plants. And Cynthia Gingerich also spoke before about floral displays, and nothing in December. Okay. If you have any questions, put them in the chat, please. This is our YouTube channel, so this is where you go to review the webinars that we've had, and we're building up a good following. It's been almost 1,000 views. We have several different playlists and 96 subscribers. And we're starting from scratch, so that's a big deal for us to have achieved this already. Kind of restarted our chapter a year or so ago. Again, we're the North San Joaquin Valley CNPS. And our website is chapters.cnps.org/NSJ. I'm kind of repeating things here, but just to remind you that everything is recorded. And if you have an idea for a webinar, you want to be a speaker, please let me know. And if you just have an idea of a topic you'd like to hear, let me know, and I'll see if I can find somebody. Okay, well, that's my part. And now I'm going to pass it to Mike, who's going to give you an overview of our chapter.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Does everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. Thank you. Hi, I wanted to give you an introduction to our chapter, the North San Joaquin Valley chapter of the California Native Plant Society. The California Native Plant Society is a statewide organization, and you can join it for a regular individual membership of $50 to receive Flora and Artemisia magazines, get benefits such as discounts at certain nurseries, sales and such, and the ability to join 2 different chapters of CNPS. If you'd like to join North San Joaquin Valley chapter and one other, such as the Santa Clara Valley chapter, the Sacramento chapter, or others, it will be an option when you go to the link on the slide. We hope you join us here in the North San Joaquin Valley chapter, and whichever other chapters you feel a kinship with. I said the membership was $50, but there are lower dues for people who have reduced incomes and higher membership levels for those who are able to help the organization more financially. It's a great cause. The regular membership link is right here, cnps.org/membership. Remember, this is the link to join up. And by the way, I put this link and several others information in the chat just now. Our 4th edition of our newsletter was sent out a few days ago. Volume 4 of the Oak Branch was sent out to all of our members via email. This was our Lovin' Our Pollinators edition. This is this was our, I said that like 3 times, with articles on helping native bees, learning about our local swallowtail butterflies, and our photo page, views of some beautiful pollinators in a Manteca backyard. Cece Hurst-Hart, our president and big-time field trip leader, takes us on virtual video reels of her favorite native plant hangouts. And our conservation committee is finally getting off the ground. Rhonda Allen clues us in on some great fragrant native plants and shows us incredible photos of late spring wildflowers of the central foothills. Cece Hurst-Hart is leading field trips, and she has been collaborating with the local Audubon Society and Sierra Club chapters. So bring binoculars when you go to these field trips because they are events for nature lovers. Join us at Red Hills Recreation Management Area on May 13th, 2023 at 9 a.m. for a beautiful Mother's Day nature walk. This area is incredibly special because of the serpentine soil that makes it hard for most species to survive. However, it is still filled with lots of specialized plants that are able to tolerate those harsh conditions. All ages welcome. The walk will be easy and mostly flat. On May 19th at 7 p.m., Yokuts chapter of the Sierra Club is holding an in-person presentation called California Native Seed and Plants for Habitat Restoration in the San Joaquin Valley in Modesto. Details in our newsletter, or if you have any questions, you can put them in our chat directed to me. And if I can answer them, I will, or I will either send them to Yokuts chapter, or they may actually be in the audience here. So I'll just direct it to them. And June 4th, we're going to there's a lot of background noise. Is everybody? Thank you. Let's see. It's West Side Trail. Yeah. June 4th, we're going to the West Side Trail in Tuolumne to explore the former railroad. This former railroad will search for wildflowers and other interesting wildlife. We'll meet at the trailhead parking at 10:30 a.m. and meander down the trail together. We will not be exploring the whole length of the trail, just as much as we can in about 2 hours. The hike is suitable for all ages. And Meadows of Yosemite, July 8th at 7:30 a.m. Now, 7:30 is when you show up in Oakdale, and then we carpool together to Yosemite National Park. Come travel to the mountains and experience the beauty of the forest meadows. This guided tour will introduce you to common wildflowers you can see throughout the park meadows. We will carpool from Oakdale into the park, where we will explore multiple meadows as we drive through the park to Tuolumne Meadows. You are welcome to meet us at the gate. Please email cnps.nsj@gmail.com to coordinate this. Otherwise, we can carpool to save on gas and park entrance fees. Just remember, there is that kind of stuff. This will be an all-day trip and will require walking through unpaved trails. And by the way, there's a lot more details in the newsletter about all of this. Cece is the one who is leading this. So if you have any questions, if you want to RSVP, go ahead and send her an email at cnps.nsj@gmail.com, which is not to be confused with my email, which is cnps.nsj.membership@gmail.com. Okay, I should point out that we intend to do everything by email. We recognize that there are some people who are actually prefer US mail, and for those who are inconvenienced, we do apologize, but we don't have the financial or volunteer base to put the newsletter out that way. We've decided to save some trees and remain electronic. If this is a problem, let us know, but so far nobody has complained at all. If you're on our list, you should have received the newsletter, but if you are somehow got missed, let me know in chat and go ahead and send it directly to me. Don't let everybody know. And to be put on our list, just let me know there. And we want our newsletter to get out to everyone. That's our mission, to promote native plants around our region. And our best way of doing it is to keep native plants on everyone's minds through events and presentations and gardening. So we want to keep those who haven't joined the statewide organization in the loop. So perhaps you can join us for an event or two and to remind you that we are here. Why care about native plants? We are finding out more and more each day about the true need to restore our environment as much as we can. The man who has been trying to explain the need for native plants with the most eloquence is Doug Ptolemy, a professor from Delaware. He's written 3 books on the subject, all of which circle around the theme that we have been damaging the environment dramatically, but that there is hope in native plants. 95% of all birds feed insects to their young. Caterpillars are an important component of that diet, and caterpillars cannot live on non-native plants with very few exceptions. The babies, the caterpillars. Native plants are critical to the ecosystem, and a backyard with no native plants, and that is a devastatingly high percentage of them, are ecological dead zones. Planting native plants in our yards helps moths, butterflies, native bees, and other pollinators, and therefore birds, and the web goes on and on. Our cities need not be devoid of butterflies, moths, and native bees. For more information about this, you can watch a 1-hour video that knocked me over like a brick. This was a talk sponsored by our local Audubon Society chapters, several chapters right here in Central California, just this past January. And I put this link and a bunch of other things in the chat, so you can just go ahead and copy them right there. And if you have any questions during Rhonda's presentation, please add them to chat, and we're going to do all of Rhonda's questions at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Cynthia, and I will be in chat for those who have questions or comments.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I just want to say that I went on one of CC Hursthart's my first wildflower walk with her at Nice Ferry, right? Nice Ferry Landing. And it was fabulous. I mean, she's our president of our chapter. She's so knowledgeable, and she's just incredible. And she's like, she was carrying her 8-month-old baby during this whole thing. And she's leaping over these little boulders like a gazelle. It's quite the experience. So, and she typically, as far as I know, brings her baby. So, you know, people of all ages are welcome. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my presentation. I'm just going to give a quick bio overview of Rhonda, who's of course in our chapter and one of our board members. She is actually the founder, developer, and passion behind this fantastic garden, which in my opinion is the best community native plant garden in the state. So she can tell you all about it. So she's a member of our chapter CNPS. She's also a California naturalist and a Stanislaus County Master Gardener. And she knows a lot about pollinators, and she speaks at different garden clubs, and she's really on a mission to persuade many people in our area to get the passion for planting and for planting native plants. And she's also a wonderful photographer. As you'll see, if you sign up for the newsletter, many of her photos are in our newsletters. Okay, I'm going to pass it to Rhonda now. Rhonda, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so you take the screen from me.
Okay, I think you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hello, everybody out there in Zoom land. I'm Rhonda Allen, and today I'll be sharing with you my experience of developing this beautiful garden in Modesto, California called the Loma Native Garden. This was once a vacant strip of ground, totally neglected, overrun by weeds such as star thistle and puncture vine. And it is now a beautiful place, a very special place. I like to call it a sanctuary, really, for people and wildlife. Even I am amazed at how it has changed over the last few years. The garden is now an environment friendly for pollinators and wildlife of all kinds. It is used by people where once it was impassable, filled with thorns, which I will show you pictures of in just a moment. And when I first started the idea of the garden, my whole goal at the beginning was just to create a space that could be usable for people who lived around the area, and also so it would help the neighborhood look nicer because it was a weed patch. And but now my priorities are different. I knew nothing about native plants for the most part when I started. I just knew I did not think it should look like this, and it was not acceptable to have this in my neighborhood. So I started researching and talking to people who had grown native plants and realized that this was the most practical use for this space. And now my priorities are to create a haven for wildlife, because I saw after planting native plants what was happening with the interactions with bees and butterflies and the plants in the garden. And I started noticing things I had never seen before. Before planting the garden, I had never seen a green sweat bee. I had never seen a little group of longhorn bees clustered up sleeping on a flower at night. I had never seen so many butterflies that I had never noticed before. Now I can name more than a dozen butterflies that are in the garden. So it's really changed me. Even though I changed the landscape, it's changed me a lot. And I think that's really very important, because now I have a passion to see other people do similar projects. This may not be a model, but it's certainly an example of what we can do to take a vacant piece of property or a unused piece of property and create something useful out of it. And it's not only just ornamental, it's very productive, this space. And Mike already told us why native gardens are very important. And, hopefully through this presentation, you will see that's the case as well, that this is an important thing to grow native plants and to provide a space, a haven for wildlife. There are actually hundreds of plants in this garden, different species, so I will not be able to go into detail about all of them, but just give you some basics about what grows well here in the valley with our summer heat. I do tend the garden regularly and supplement some parts of it with water. There is some irrigation, but the garden is large, and it takes me sometimes 3 weeks to get around to the same spot because of the size and the needs there. So some plants don't get much nurturing. They're on their own most of the time. Recently, I was told by a new visitor who came to the garden that it was soothing to be in the garden, and that made me stop and think, how that was a beautiful comment. when you go out on a nature walk, I think we all feel that way when we're in nature. It's sort of soothing to be around a real natural environment. And for someone to think of that in this garden really made me feel good. And I feel that way a lot too, that it is soothing to be there. So I'm going to start with a description now of the garden. This garden is approximately 2 acres. It borders a residential street. It's very long and narrow, so it's kind of an unusual shape. It is city property. I would call it abandoned, but it's not totally abandoned. It once was an irrigation canal. It once was a walnut orchard, but basically it's just an easement that nobody has done anything with. It did have and does have an asphalt walkway on the backside bordering a fence line, and it is surrounded by homes on either side. On the garden, we put a path through the center. There's a beginning and an end of the path. The west end of the garden has a bulletin board that's a little larger, and in that bulletin board, I put a lot of information about the garden itself, about how to volunteer or donate, and also information about the plants in the garden. On the east end of the garden, there's a smaller bulletin board, and this is located in what we call the children's garden section. And in it, there's some information about possibly coming events and also pollinator information and things that kids might be able to read. Here's a picture of the pathway through the garden and what it kind of looks like. This was taken in March. Well, actually, it might have been the 1st of April. And you can see the ceanothus, which are scattered throughout the garden, blooming in different shades of blue, and what the trees look like now. The garden is about 6 years old. Here's another section of the garden where there's a triangle. The path divides, and in that triangle is where our timer box is for the irrigation. The large plant you see in the foreground is actually a bee's bliss sage, and it's blooming still. Anyway, just another perspective of the garden so you can see how it's laid out. When the garden was developed, I had to meet with the city to discuss, what are some possible potential for this space. And we talked about a dog park and other things before I realized that this was the best choice. And I needed to get city approval. And the city said, well, we're not going to provide anything for you for this garden except the space. Well, it's kind of like a lease. They had to sign an MOU, which is a memorandum of understanding, saying basically the neighborhood would take care of all the expenses and all the maintenance and all the work. So they suggested that we have a neighborhood meeting to gather more support to see if the neighborhood wanted this done, and which we did. We had a large community meeting at a church nearby, and there was a lot of interest. We also needed to contact professional advisors who knew things about how to put a path in, how to lay irrigation, all the things that come with creating a larger garden. We also needed donations, so we did have some fundraising things happen. We contacted people in the neighborhood to see if there were people who might be willing to support the development. We formed a committee to coordinate some of the activities that would need to occur. And of course, we needed to create a visual plan. The city requested that we have an actual architectural plan drawn up. So it was a formal blueprint designed by an architect that we had to present to the city council. And that would have been a very expensive thing to do, but we had a neighbor who was an architect who was willing to do this for us. So thankfully, he drew up the architectural plan based on a drawing I did. So I did draw out the layout of what I thought the garden, I had a vision, and he basically put that into a blueprint. Here is the strip of property. This is in 2016, before anything was done. This is on Encina Avenue. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a fence, and behind it is a row of homes. And then on the other side, on the right-hand side of the street, is a row of homes facing the garden. If you look really, really close at that dry patch of ground, you'll see little piles. These are the piles of puncture vine. During the summer of 2016, I spent the summer weeding this ground. I piled up all of the puncture vine I could get, and we actually burned some of it. We hauled it away. The thorns were so bad that you couldn't even walk your dog across here. because of star thistle and puncture vine mainly, but there were all kinds of horrid weeds. The city would come once, maybe twice a year if the weeds got bad, and they would mow it down. So this actually looks pretty good because the weeds aren't tall. But there was not one bit of water here. There is no electricity in this ground. There are sewer lines along the back, and then we have the telephone wires on the front. So we had to be careful about where we planted large trees because of those two things being a part of the property. So here's a couple of neighbors I talked into helping me remove puncture vine. The bags you see on the left-hand corner here are bags of puncture vine that we bagged up to get rid of, and here we are out here digging. It took endless hours, and you know, I just didn't see any other way of making it hospitable for planting if we didn't get rid of that, because puncture vine seeds can stay in the ground for years. So that was the first thing that was done, and you know, you can tell what a nut I am that I actually did that. Anyway, so the concepts that I discussed with people to get them on board was that we wanted to develop a useful model with this space that the neighborhood could benefit from. One, a conservation model, how to conserve water with planting. So a lot of us plant things in our yard that need a lot of water, like lawns. So we were hoping that we could create a model that would not use that kind of water. We also wanted to have pollinator habitat to encourage bees and butterflies. We wanted to restore a natural environment so that it kind of blended with the neighborhood. We live close to a creek, and so kind of to blend in with what the original habitat of this Loma neighborhood was like was another idea. We wanted to beautify the neighborhood, of course, make it look nicer, and maybe create an educational resource so people could come here and learn what they could do in their own landscapes. This is the thing I actually typed up to give to the neighbors when I had my meeting. And one of the, I know this is hard for you to read probably, but at the bottom, some of the things we talked about what to plant focused mainly on low water needs, so drought tolerant plants. How available were they for residents? Can you get these plants at a nursery within a certain distance? And also what would be desirable for growth habits that might be used in a home landscape. So they would be fairly maintainable, and such as ground covers to replace a lawn. That would be one example of something we would hope to have. We wanted to have more than one example of a species for a variety of bloom colors and sizes so people would have choices in their landscape. And we wanted to keep it mainly native. Now the garden is not 100% native. It's about, I would say, 80% native. We have some plants that are really good pollinators that are in the garden, or that are also very drought tolerant that are in the garden that we enjoy having there, such as lantana grows well, and a chase tree, which has purple spires, is a good pollinator tree, and it's drought tolerant. We have lavender. There's a few, you know, quite a variety of things that do well in our area that are not native, but we did want a native garden. So I said the minimum would be 80%. So here we go. Before the work was started, we had this. The path along the back side was this asphalt walkway. Kids could walk to school on this from the distant neighborhood, and also the people who live in the area could use this because you could not walk through the center. It was just too awful. After the path went in, everything changed. The path created something desirable. It was like an invitation to walk here. And so here everything's still very small, but you still had something to look at and a space to enjoy. We immediately started mulching. Every year we have something called Loma Modesto Day in April, and I would get 20 or 30 people out to help me mulch. So for the last several years, we've had a day of mulching to cover the ground so we wouldn't have to deal with as many weeds. But you can see already after this first year, with even though the plants are small, that it's an inviting space compared to what it was. So here I am in the center looking at the garden. There's still a lot of empty land here. The trees are small. There's a few plants around them. We usually started with planting around the trees that we put in. But it's a lot of open space, a lot of lot of weeding still needed to occur, but this is the beginning. When you look at it, you can see how it was going to develop from there just by how it's laid out. This is what the garden looks like today. It's a mature garden. Notice how the trees have grown, and they're starting to have a canopy to create a little shade. The shrubs have filled in. They have spread on their own. Mother Nature is doing what it wants to do down there, as much as I try to fight it. The space has filled in more than anything on its own. There are spaces for wildflowers. I've spread seeds in the past, but now they're seeding themselves, and they fill in all the empty spaces during the spring so that we get a lot of color. But it's really in a beautiful space with all the variety of plants that we have there now. It's just, we keep adding different things each year, and as we create more shade, we will add things that can handle more shade. So it will be an evolving process. Originally, we wanted pollinator garden to be a part of this, so we've created these mounds. They're raised areas where we put a variety of plants that would attract insects and be colorful, and people who are walking through the garden would enjoy too. And these needed to be drought tolerant plants and things that were available. So these are an example of how, when we first started, we started planting things on these little mounds. We also planted native grasses in different areas. They have their own little space. Some of my favorite grasses we planted are the alkali sacatan, which has these beautiful seed heads on them, and the blue grama grass, which is a little smaller, but these do really well in the native garden with our weather. And they have a great relationship with the oak trees too, the native grasses. We planted other native trees besides the valley oak. The valley oak was the most important tree in the garden. We planted 32 of those as the foundation, but we also planted toyons, which have the red berries. Western redbud, we have a row of those near the street side, so we get them blooming all at the same time, usually in March or April. When we started creating the garden, especially after the trees went in, all of a sudden wildlife started occurring. We started seeing the bees and the butterflies, and these are just a few examples of some of the wildlife that have come to the garden. At the top center there, you see the little longhorn bees all huddled up together. These are the males, and I had never seen anything like that in my life until this garden was built. And we get lots of hummingbirds, all kinds of butterflies, moths, and so on. So this is just a sample. I wrote this, to bring back the butterflies and bees, we need to keep restoring their natural habitat. And I think we all know this, that they're needing natural habitat, not nursery ornamental habitat. And I found this quote from the Wild Ones, which I loved, and that is that in real estate, it's location, location, location. For monarchs and other wildlife, it's habitat, habitat, habitat. So I feel like the garden is creating habitat for the wildlife, and that is a beautiful thing. And I do see how it's changing the interactions of the garden on a daily basis with the different insects and birds that come. So now, instead of a vacant piece of property, we have visitors every day. They use the garden every day. There's a lot of dog walkers, there's joggers. We built a little section called the Children's Garden, so there's families that come to that part. People who just want to have like a meditative walk come to the garden. There's many reasons people come, but in the beginning, they didn't have a lot to look at, but it was still therapy to walk there. So it all starts with having a vision for a space, I believe, when you look at it and see what it could become. And that's what I guess my role was to see this spot and think, wow, our neighborhood could really benefit from a usable space. I'm standing in the middle of where the crushed granite pathway was built through the center. It kind of meanders through the oak trees, and a few little baby plants were there. And then this was after it was mulched on the right, and things were started a little more established after about a year. The garden itself has been a work of passion, but it takes a lot of diligence and hard work. I couldn't just create an idea and walk away. There was nobody to take it over. Not everybody has the vision or the any knowledge about native plants in the neighborhood. So really, it's been something I've had to keep working on constantly. I work at the garden 3 or 4 days a week, and there's weeding, pruning, watering, all kinds of things that go on a regular basis. The work doesn't really end. It hasn't gotten easier as things have filled in. There's really more to do. There's still weeds. Unfortunately, this winter with the rains and the winds, the invasives kind of blew in. So I've really been battling invasives this year. But anyway, hard work, but it's a work of love. We've had to do some fundraising to raise, we've had a native plant sale, we've had a rummage sale, I even created a plant shower where I had a list of plants I wanted for the garden and had people sign up to buy a plant that they would donate to the garden to create more pollinator space and so on. So we did some creative things to raise money. And I did have help. And I wanted to talk about these two people a little bit, Lillian and Jose. They've been sort of my hands through this. Lillian, on the left, sitting on the bench with me, is a native plant. I consider her to be an expert. She's been gardening with native plants for years, and she knows all about the cultural uses of the plants from the Native American perspective. She has a lot of background in how to grow them. She's read a lot of books, and she's just done it through experience. So I relied on her for a lot of information about what would do well in the garden. The man on the right is named Jose. He moved into the neighborhood from San Jose, and he was a retired landscape worker. And he knew a lot about how to lay irrigation, how to fix irrigation. He could dig trenches for irrigation. He did, and he can help me when things are broken. And so I still call on him today to help me when there's a problem in the garden. He lives nearby. And so without him, I don't know how I would do a lot of what I've done, because I need someone like that I can count on to help me fix problems. So these two have been very valuable to me. We've also had some community spirit in the garden. This was started back in 2017. The picture at the top right is a group of workers from Subaru. Modesto Subaru sponsored us that year, and they came with their workers, their team, and helped me plant. Notice we used mainly 1-gallon containers when we planted. We had a group of Boy Scouts come. So these were on Love Modesto days in April, where we would get a large group. So I could always count on that one day a year of having a group there willing to do some hard labor for 2 or 3 hours and get something important done. So those have been really important things through the last 6 years, every year to have that. I would like to talk about my 2 bills. The other people this garden could not have happened without these 2 men standing next to me. The one on the left is Bill Heisel. Bill Heisel was a retired engineer who knew all about land surveying and how to use equipment and so on. This man, who I was told about from another neighbor, was the one who actually created the garden space. He took my drawings and we rented the equipment, and he volunteered his time, and he used a tractor, laid out the path. He dug out dry beds. He mounded up the soil to contour where the pollinator mounds would go. So he basically created the design of the garden that I had on paper with equipment. He dug trenches with a trencher that we rented for the irrigation. He did all of that for no pay. We did get donations to pay for the irrigation supplies and so on, all of the materials, but he gave his time. The other Bill on the right is Bill Zaslowski, and he was our city councilman at the time. And Bill is the one who got the city to turn on the water for me. They had told me when we started the garden that there was no way. They had no staff, no money, nothing. There was not going to be any water turned on for this garden. And I wasn't totally worried about it at first, because I was thinking, well, drought tolerant, we can do it. But then as I started, working on the garden, I realized that there was no way just with a hose from somebody's backyard that I was going to be able to keep things alive. So I called Bill one day and asked him if he could consider talking the city into turning on water for the garden, because we needed the new plants to have water at least for a while and to get things going. And he listened to me, and he believed in the plan. And so he called up the public works, whoever was in charge of hooking up water, and within half an hour he had them agree to do it. So both of these two guys kind of saved the garden in my perspective. So I thank them both. So the story of the garden starts with the oak trees. In January of 2017, the city had a grant and they needed to plant trees. So I heard about the grant and I said, well, can you bring oak trees to this space? And they brought 32 oak trees, and I had it all laid out where how far apart to put them and so on. And they planted them right where I asked them. The city crew was there, the forestry crew, on a January day, and this is what they look like in their pots when we got them. And this, of course, on the right is a picture of a year later, after some mulching had been done and the path had been put in. This is before the path, before anything else, were the oak trees. They are truly the foundation of the garden, and they are what changed everything. This is what the oak trees look like today. They're all valley oak, which I'm sure you know get quite large, so they are going to shade the space. They're already starting to create shade in the garden, and they're beautiful trees, and we're very lucky to have them. Every single one of them survived. For the last 6 years, we haven't lost one tree, so I'm very happy about that. The garden, I think I've already said, is basically stages. You start with an idea and you keep adding to it. And this little picture here shows the idea. I had somebody donate this pile of rocks to create a rock garden on the top right. And then we started to slowly plant a few things. People donated things, or, we got them from somebody. They started to grow, and then we added them more, and they grew more, and things just started to happen on their own after you get started. And that's kind of the way the whole garden developed. You start with an idea, you get some material, and then it just expands from there. We've brought in mulch, crushed rock, compost. We brought in dry bed cobble. We have 2 dry beds in the garden. We added special features. This heart shape was around one oak tree. It's gravel, kind of made a shape out of it. And then we put flagstone around another tree to create a meditation circle. So these were just special features to add interest to the garden. The irrigation was a process that took a while. We had people in the neighborhood who knew about laying PVC pipe and irrigation and valves and all that. Jose was the leader on this. And these gentlemen here that you see, Bill is on the tractor. These are the ones, and I learned a lot about irrigation myself helping with this, but there was a small handful of people who did all of this. We had deep trenches. They were 3 feet deep throughout that entire length of that property. And thank goodness we were able to put those in, because it saved a lot of plants. The path was also donated, believe it or not. It's a crushed granite path. It was laid out by Bill here with the tractor, and then a friend of somebody who lives in the neighborhood had this, basically a construction company business who laid paths and roads. They had all the equipment, and one of our neighborhood leaders talked them into donating their time to come lay this path for us. And what a blessing. It's never been restored or resurfaced. I would like to have it redone one of these days, but it still looks fairly good. So that was a blessing. The mounds, again, were created by Bill, mounding it with the tractor and creating a kind of contour. When we started, we had these little 1-gallon plants put on the mound. They kind of face the street, so from the street you can see the flowers a little better instead of a flat surface. And then we brought in a few rocks and other things to kind of, embellish that. And then they start to grow, and the mounds start to fill in. This is what the mounds look like from the street. You can see the ground is very flat here, but he kind of built it up so that it's also good for drainage. But to view them better from the street was part of the idea. So the pollinator mounds, again, start with a few plants and filled in and they grow. And now they're very overgrown. I'm sorry to say they're not even hardly visible that it's a mound anymore. We added signs, different signs. I had a friend who had this piece of redwood burl. She was going to make into a table. It was in her garage. And she said, you know, this would be a better place to put it, is in the garden. Make a sign out of it. And so we had it carved. Lillian's here on the right with me. And in the middle is Rhonda Cameron, who was a friend that I took the California Naturalist class with. And she's the one that helped me develop a website for the garden. We added many extra features. These are especially in the children's garden. We had some little rock designs, a teepee for vines. Someone donated this beautiful teepee in the children's garden that has beautiful sayings on it about kindness and so on. We put in little stones for tic-tac-toe and other little things like that that kids could play on. The bulletin boards are, I had drawn out a design for, and I was very lucky to find an Eagle Scout who needed a project. Keith Kubik and his father built the 2 bulletin boards and installed them in May of 2017. So this was after the trees were in and the path was created. They installed these, and they still look pretty good today. He did a really great job, and then his troop came and helped him install them. Trees, we have these other trees in the garden that have done well. The chase tree, which is not native, has purple blooms that do really well in the garden for pollinators. The Fremontodendron with the yellow blooms does well. The desert willow with the pink blooms, the hummingbirds love that one. We have the redbud trees that bloom pink in usually March. Elderberry trees, and many of these are spreading. They actually have babies that have come up, especially the desert willow. I've had so many babies now that have created almost a little grove of desert willows now. So these are just some of the other trees besides the oak trees. Here's another picture of the garden with some of the vegetation there. There's the size of the oak tree that you see. Just see how it's developed so much. So I wanted to talk about what are the key plants in the garden. This is not all of the plants, but I would say these are the ones that kind of give the face to the garden for what's really an important native plant that is crucial to the habitat there. So we have the 32 Valley oak trees, number 1. They are the backbone. We have ceanothus shrubs, and we have several different varieties that are doing well in the garden. The Concha, Frosty Blue, Joyce Coulter, the Ray Hartman, Caramel Creeper, if you put it in the right spot. The Yankee Point and the Snow Flurry are all in the garden. We also have the Thericiflora Skylark in the garden doing okay. So these are all really important plants. They are early bloomers that bring pollen for the bees. Toyon, we have probably 10 to 12 toyon shrubs in the garden, which have the berries that the birds like. Coyote bush, we have both the prostate kind and the taller varieties, and these bloom with white flowers in the winter when there's very little pollen around, so the bees have something in the late season. California fuchsia with its orange tubes, very popular with our hummingbirds, and they bloom in the late summer and fall. California buckwheat is the picture in the center there. It has the ball-like white flowers in the summer. And it's a very important pollinator plant in the garden. It's also spreading a lot in the garden, creating new plants. The St. Catherine's lace, which is the giganteum buckwheat, is beautiful lacy flowers on that, also a summer bloomer. Elderberry is a great plant. Not only its white flowers, but it also has the berries that the birds will eat. We have several varieties of manzanitas, but I would say the best two for being successful are the Sentinel and the Howard McMinn. We also have Dr. Hurd, and we've tried the Emerald Carpet. It's the low variety creeping kind, but it doesn't thrive in my opinion. It's alive, but it doesn't seem to take off and reproduce or anything like that. So I would recommend these two if you had a hot environment. The Western Redbud, we have a whole row of those, and they do great, and they're great host plants for many moths. The Cleveland Sage, they have just gotten so big. They are a beautiful smelling plant, and they have beautiful tall spires of color for the pollinators to be attracted to. and the bee's bliss, which is a relative of that. Mahonia, which is also called Oregon grape, has the little yellow flowers the bees love in the early spring. And it's also got a different texture to it that's really kind of nice in the garden. Coffee berry, which has berries for birds, and it also has blooms. It's an evergreen that does well in the garden. It stays a nice manageable size as well. Artemisias, these are kind of the feathery grayish foliage. They really look nice under an oak tree, and they create a nice habitat plant. Deer grass, very large grass that grows in the garden. It's also spreading. And then the golden currant is one that I think is really important because it's an early bloomer when the bees are first coming out. The yellow blooms are very attractive. And I just discovered this year that the hummingbirds like it as well. So these are some of the ones I would call the key plants in the garden. There are many others. Here's some pictures of ceanothus. We have different varieties and different shades of blue. We start them, they're planted when they're small in a 1-gallon container, and then this is what we had after 4 or 5 years, these large shrubs. They're actually overtaking the path now. I may have to get down and actually prune them. They attract bees and butterflies both, and they bloom usually from February through March. They're about done now. They bloomed a little late this year with the cold weather. The California fuchsia, we have several varieties. The basic Cannon variety does great. This attracts hummingbirds, and it's lovely because it's a late summer and fall bloomer when you need that pollen in the late season. The buckwheats, here's the California buckwheat, the common one at the bottom with the ball flower, and then the St. Catherine's lace that you see at the top, which gets quite large. It's not for everybody's landscape, but it's a nice, lovely plant, and it's growing well in the garden. These are summer bloomers, and they attract butterflies. Some habitat plants. I call these habitat plants because they tend to spread and create a space that's a good shelter for wildlife, as well as having pollen and nectar available, or seeds. They create seeds for the birds as well. So the mule fat, which is a shrub that gets pretty tall, 8 to 10 feet tall, has these white flowers that the little native bees love. It's filled with little native bees. Toyon with berries for birds, buckwheats. The grandelia has the yellow aster flower on it, is great for bees. And this is a plant you see on the roadsides. It's really hardy and it spreads very quickly. Goldenrod is spreading very well in the garden. This is a late season bloomer too. Mugwort, this is one of the artemisias that we put around the oak trees for habitat. Creates a lot of seeds for the birds in the fall. Quail bush gets quite large. It also is a great plant for shelter for animal life, but also has a lot of seeds for the birds. Some bloomers, these attract the pollinators, and there's obviously many more than this. This is just a sampling, but the sulfur buckwheat you see on the left, the yellow flowers, the moonshine yarrow in the center. We have several penstemons that do well, several different kinds of sages. We have black sage, rose sage, purple sage, white sage, the Cleveland sage, and so on. And also we have a couple varieties of milkweed. This is the narrow leaf you see in the picture. These are all of these are good plants for our pollinators. Here's some other ones that I really like and attract a lot of pollinators. Coyote mint, you see on the left. The golden currant, which is the early bloomer. Lilac verbena is there in the center. Apricot mallow, it's that beautiful orange color. The blue-eyed grass, black-eyed Susan, which is a late bloomer, it's late summer to fall. And then the seaside daisy. These all do really well. And the daisies in the aster family typically attract a lot of the little native bees. They love the asters. So this is some that I would say would be important for pollinators. We also have some areas that are wildflower patches that were seeded. So we get the native seed packets that have a variety of seeds, and they have blooms at different times, so they kind of rotate. The early ones would be the baby blue eyes you see in the middle and the tidy tips, as well as some of the poppies. The desert bluebell you see at the bottom there in the middle comes out a little bit later, as well as the clarkias. The one at the bottom is the farewell to spring, which usually is blooming in May. At the top you see elegant clarkia, which is taller, but it's now blooming. anyway, there's just a variety, and these are mainly annuals. And so when they're done, there's a few of the perennials that are left in the wildflower patch, like the yarrows, that kind of take off and fill in the space when these are gone. But these attract the early bees especially. I also decided to have a meadow habitat, which is a very difficult thing to keep going. It's really hard to keep it cleaned out of invasives because it's by the road. When the annuals are done, there's empty space. Now, there's a lot of grasses in here, the blue grama grass, purple needle grass, the purple threon. There's some deer grass and some others. But in between, the bunch grasses tend to leave spaces between them when they grow. When the invasives come in, they cover all that space. So it needs to be weeded out so that the wildflowers have a place to live. And I recently put in a bunch of perennials to see if we could have summer blooms in the meadow so that the bloom would last longer for the pollinators. So this is a work in progress. It's hard to keep a meadow up, I'm finding. But I think it's worth doing, and it's a space that people stay out of for the most part. It's just for the bees and the butterflies. And I'm done pretty well at keeping people out of it. So, and I put some logs in there for shelter for the bees and so on to keep it like a natural meadow. I just wanted to say a word for the sunflowers. These are the most important pollinator plant in the garden. These are the common sunflowers. I've never planted any of these. They come up on their own and they fill in any space that's left available to them. The problem is that when they're done, they leave all these seeds behind. And so I'm having to pull out hundreds and hundreds of small sunflowers because they come up along the walkway and in places where you don't want them. But they do provide great pollen and nectar for the bees and the butterflies. They both love them. And they're just covered with insects all the time. And they have so many blooms that you just can't go wrong with having sunflowers in your garden. So the people in the neighborhood love them too. I wanted to talk about the children's garden, which is a section we created so kids would come to the garden and enjoy their time there. And it's kind of a gathering place now. There were two little trees already in the garden when we started that they're not native and they're actually not the best choices to have in the garden, but they had shade. And we put some little stumps there for kids to sit on and started building around that. I got a Girl Scout group involved and they built a little herb circle and a little butterfly garden. We also added the little library, and there's a hopscotch area and a tic-tac-toe area and the teepee with vines on it. So things that attract the kids. And this is the most used space in the garden. They sit on the stumps and they read the little books right there. They can play. And they, I'm tickled all the time when I see families sitting there. This is what it looks like now. The herb circle is all grown up. And these are the little stumps that they can sit on by the library. And there's a couple benches we made. So it's a very used space. The teepee's back here. This is an outlet to the road that you see on the top picture. So that's the children's garden. We also created a couple other special areas in the garden. I call these the blue-gray garden and the white-silver garden. The silver and gray have to do with the leaves. When you see silver and gray foliage, that usually means it's drought tolerant. Some examples of the blue species, we have the ceanothus and lupins that grow in that area with the blue flowers, and then the gray leaves on things like artemisia and some of the sages and so on. In the white garden, it's either white flowers or silvery leaves. And we have the white sage growing there. This is mock orange. We have the canyon snow iris, some white poppies, and so on. These are just a few examples of what grows there. This is what the blue-gray garden looks like now. The Cleveland sages and the bee's bliss are really large and have taken over most of the area. This is a concha ceanothus in the background. We have blue-eyed grass all through the center of that area growing. And you see the lupin. So it's really filled in a lot. Here's some pictures of the white garden now. The mock orange is a very beautiful plant and just has a heavenly scent. We have the white yarrow here. We have Queen Anne's lace, which is just starting to bloom. And white sage is in this area. There's another artemisia. There's a white flowering spirea growing here, and so on. So these are just a few pictures. I also decided to highlight some of the California desert plants in what I call the desert area. We started with gravel and sand and a few rocks and planted some succulent type plants in there. Some of these were donated from people who grow succulents in the neighborhood. And then they started to grow, and this is all filled in now. It's not even recognizable. We also planted a Palo Verde tree, which is now very large, and it's a highlight of that area because the bright yellow flowers bring in all the carpenter bees. We have desert willows that grow in that area, and the hummingbirds love that. We have the rabbit brush with its yellow flowers that blooms late in the summer and to the fall. And then the sagebrushes, which have that beautiful feathery texture, are in this area. So it's really kind of a unique space. And this is it now. It's hard to believe, but this picture with the bench shows the path side of the garden. The Palo Verde tree, as you can see, it faces the road the other way. And then the flowers that you see are all filled in on their own. The wildflowers come in and they fill the empty spaces in the front of the desert. So it's very colorful as well. So it's really changing all the time. Some other additions to the garden, we put in a second sign. This was also a piece of wood donated by a neighbor that wasn't using it, a burl. And we put in the benches, and Jose, my right-hand man, is really good at building with wood, and he built all of these from a redwood tree that we cut down along the path that was should not have been there. And he built these and designed them himself. We put in a pet waste station. We have 2 garbage cans, one on either end. And we have a couple of these little interactive signs that were created to tell you about a plant that they're located next to. I actually painted some hubcap flowers, and we installed those along the fence line where there's no water and nothing was growing. So these are just some of the things we added. We had a birdhouse donated. We now have 2 more libraries for adult books on either end, as well as the one in the children's garden. We put a little bee crossing sign in, and then we made all these signs for plants to show what pollinators are posting certain plants, what they host. So they give information to people walking through the garden about pollinator plants and what insects they attract. We commissioned a mural, and this is at the end of the children's garden. It divides the children's garden from our vegetable garden, which is on the other end of the mural behind it. And it basically depicts the insects that are hosted by certain plants in our area. So it has, for example, milkweed with a monarch. So it teaches through pictures what plants insects go to. So the garden keeps growing, the different sections. As I said before, it's kind of been a stage thing. We've added plants, but also the plants add themselves by reproducing. So there's just constant changes. There's also constant maintenance, weeding regularly, watering regularly, fixing leaks and problems with irrigation. We have to rake the path to keep it free of debris. There's a lot of pruning, deadheading, that sort of thing. So it's like any garden that needs work constantly. We've had a few problems. A lot of people walk their dogs, but not everybody likes to pick up after their dogs. So dog poo piles are a problem for me, especially since I work in the garden. We have litter. When cars park on the roadside, a lot of times they'll open their door and stuff falls out. It's not so much people are throwing stuff in the garden, but there are people who walk by, like homeless people or vagrants, and because it is open to the world, it's right there on the street. So we do get some litter that we have to look for. It's not bad though. We have a very small tool shed at the end of the garden, which some tools are stored in, but we've had it broken into 3 times. So I'm really reluctant to put all of my hoses and different things in that storage. So I tend to bring it with me in my car every time I work at the garden because I don't want to lose it. We have too many sunflower seeds, so I have to pull a lot of those out. That's a problem because it takes me quite a bit of time. We have to deal with invasive plants blowing off the street, and we have vandalism. There's a junior high nearby, and sometimes the kids are not always respectful of the garden. We've had them break the door on the little library and pull signs out and do all kinds of things. So these are just some of the kinds of typical problems you would have in an open space. The next
Rhonda, Rhonda, this is Cynthia. I just want to let you know that you should probably end your presentation in a few minutes so that people can
Yeah,
ask
I only have
questions.
2 or 3 slides to talk about left.
Oh, great.
I'm almost there. So the next goals for the garden are education and community awareness. We've had some school groups come in, some, small kid groups like Girl Scout groups and so on, and of course community groups. But we want to educate people more about the benefits of native plants, bring community awareness into people redoing their landscapes in their yards to include native plants. So those are goals that we still hope to improve upon. Right now, these are the uses of the garden. We have garden club and group tours. We have Master Gardener Sierra Club, Native Plant Society meetings, social events. We've had 3 pollinator festivals in the garden, a few neighborhood gatherings and social events. The junior high has brought some students through for plant observations, and so is our local community college. They have a horticultural program that comes in to study. I do a lot of consultations with community members about what to plant in their home landscapes, and sometimes we have seed collection and propagation going on. There's some of the groups that have been in the garden. The center one is the Master Gardeners with the community college students. At the top is a ladies' church group that came through for a tour. The bottom left is our local CNPS group having a meeting, and then there's some pictures of the pollinator festivals that we've had. Ways to support the native garden. I would hope that one of the things that we need to do more of is to encourage our local nurseries to stock native plants. It's been a problem. People can't find the plants when we encourage them to create these landscapes. We need to do more modeling of drought tolerant landscaping in our home garden designs to give people ideas of what to use. Educating people about the value of native plants and share the resources that we have with them. We want to link with our Native Plant Society and other organizations to learn more. There's more to learn about native plants and how they help our environment. I did create a website. It's no longer viable. It's obsolete, but it does have a lot of good information on it about the insects and the plants. We also created a GoFundMe page years ago. I haven't looked at that in a long time. I don't even know if it's working, but those are things that exist. And I believe we should envision, keep dreaming big about native gardens. We need many, many more native gardens to nourish wildlife in our areas and to change people's perspective. So I want to thank you for your interest and support of this garden. This is pictures from 2018. And as you can see, it's changed a lot. Here's a picture, part of the garden now. And that is it for me. And I know we have a few questions, so I am ready for that.
Hey, Robin.
Thank you, Rhonda. And Mike will read the questions.
Okay, I'll see what I can do.
I also wanted to say that your garden does so many things. It's a demonstration garden, so people can see what how things look in your garden and be able to take it home. And when I was there actually taking photos, there were people who come up to me and tell me that they would actually change the way that they walked in order to come through the garden. When they were walking their dogs or things like that, they deliberately go that way just so they can walk through the garden. So it's definitely in that. I know it's got to be like a nexus of the neighborhood.
It's really changed the neighborhood dynamic. It's kind of a gathering place, and I think it's kind of a meditative place. People come there to feel calm from the rest of the world. Yeah, it's kind of like being in nature, even though it's an artificial nature. It's still nature, and it's to me, it's kind of therapeutic. But it's also very productive.
This talk could be used by anyone considering a community native garden in their city, because it's not everybody might need to go through the same process I did, and not everybody. You need to have a leader who has a strong sense of purpose and hates weeds and believes in the whole process so passionately they're willing to stick with it, because you're going to get a lot of people who don't want to do the work. But it really has to be a passion, because the cities aren't always going to be there for you, and the government or whoever you think is going to help pay for it. So Janet asked, how much water did it take to establish your wonderful garden? And how much does it take now?
I don't know. I do not meter the garden, and basically it's on a drip system. The original plantings got drip, but the plants that have spread on their own have received no drip. So some things get watered and some things might get watered. So I have hose couplers. I can take a hose to the garden and hook up a hose and water things that I think need extra water, but I don't measure it or regulate it. And as I said earlier, I go around because it's 2 acres. I may water something really well, but I may not come back to that space for 3 weeks to water again. So I really don't know how much water it is using. I don't know. But it's less than you would if you had lawn there.
Jean asks after she gives you a whole bunch of compliments about the presentation and of the garden.
Okay.
Which of the ground covers that you mentioned can take the extreme heat in Stockton?
Oh, I would really highly recommend the Lipia repens. It's a beautiful ground cover. I did not share individual pictures of that, but it forms a mat like a lawn, but it has little white ball-like flowers that the native bees will come to, and it does not need much water at all. It's very drought tolerant. So, but it's a great one. It stays real low, and you can actually walk on it. If you check one of our earlier newsletters about ground covers, it was listed. I don't know what month that was, but we did an article on native ground covers, and it was in there if she could look that up somehow.
Yeah,
but otherwise, come to the garden. You can actually take a cutting from the plants, stick it in the ground somewhere, give it a little water, and it'll take off. It's that hardy.
And she mentions that her city trees were removed due to termites, so she no longer has shade.
Okay.
And then I was wondering, you have so many ceanothus, so you obviously have tried all these different ceanothus, and
I have killed 3. So just so you know, they're not always easy. Depends which ones, but
you said you had sentinel and
manzanita.
Yeah, the Howard McMinn, right?
Yeah, for manzanita. The sentinel does awesome. You never have to water it. Howard McMinn is a smaller variety. If you have a smaller space, they both do well.
You said you had Dr. Hurd?
Yes.
And what did you have? You said you tried one of the ground cover versions. The emerald carpet.
It's in the garden. Actually, we have several of the emerald carpet. It just doesn't. I mean, it's alive, and it's it's not like I wouldn't plant it maybe, but it doesn't get much nurturing either. But it just doesn't seem to be thriving as much as the ones that are so big, just going gangbusters. It doesn't reproduce itself or anything like that. So it's okay. It just isn't, special.
And have you tried other manzanitas that maybe didn't work?
I don't think I've killed a manzanita. It's not too many varieties that we've had at our native plant sales that I've found at our growers that we buy from. But I did buy one at the Sacramento chapter recently of I think it's called the white bark manzanita that I'm trying right now, and it seems to be doing okay. But those are the only ones I've come across, actually.
And I love the idea that you're trying to get the meadow going.
Yeah.
And because I honestly think that that's something that people don't put enough time in. Remember that you've got all these lawns,
right.
And I'll bet that there are things that we could do to do meadows instead of lawns, or at least try something small on a regular
if you
basis.
could put perennials in there that would bloom through the summer, because a lot of the annuals dry up by May, and then you've got nothing if you don't have a mixture. So
right.
Okay. Rhonda, why don't you mention the little area you created for kind of a demonstration pollinator garden that people could put in?
Yes, we decided to it's kind of in the center of the garden near one of the oak trees. We planted a little mini model native plant garden with examples of what people could get locally and plant that address blooms from spring through the fall, the different plants that would do well at those 3 seasons. So you'd have year-round blooms pretty much. And so like foothill pinstemon, fuchsias, there's a currant, there's ceanothus, coyote mint. All of these plants are in this little model garden, and there's a sign with what blooms when. And the great thing is we have a local nursery now. Carl Hill and Blossom Hill Nursery in Oakdale is now growing all of these plants in our area, so we don't have to travel or wait for a native plant sale that comes in from out of our area. So we have a grower now growing these things, so we can send people there to buy native plants. So we are very fortunate to have that.
That's really cool. Do you have a preference for redwood or cedar? It's hard to find redwood here, but cedar is plentiful. That's what Jean
You mean to
says.
plant a tree? I would never, ever in my wildest dreams ever plant a redwood tree in the Valley of California.
Mulch.
Mulch?
Not
Mulch.
planting a redwood tree.
You know, I get the mulch from a tree company that whatever they have available is what I get because they donate it. I'm not picky.
Where you get cedar mulch? Is that?
Yeah, I don't know. We don't have cedars in our area, so.
Right. There's instant cedar and stuff like that, but those just aren't all that common.
Yeah, they're more in the mountains.
Yeah. A lot of times you can get free mulch from the tree companies.
City? Yeah, that's where I get it, from a tree company. When they cut down trees.
There's a website called Chip Drop where you can sign up for that. And I did that for my garden. I signed up, and then I liked the tree company that came, so then I just worked with them, and I got huge amount of mulch. You want to be careful though. I tell them, no eucalyptus, no sago palm, and I should have told them not so many branches. I have a lot of branches.
You can get some pretty not good stuff when you get, so you have to kind of make sure they're bringing you quality, because remember, they're trying to save money because they might have to take it to the dump. So if they
I had over 4,000 square feet to cover, so there's no way I could have paid for that mulch.
Yeah, we've been fortunate to have a donor for our mulch. There is a really good company in Oakdale, Central Valley Ag Grinding, that gave us our mulch the first 3 years, and they had really good quality mulch. Anyway.
What happened? Do they not
Well, I just didn't want to wear them out by asking them. You know how you just don't want to over-abuse people who donate so much by continuing to keep asking. But I found a company, there was a guy who wanted to sponsor the garden for Loma Modesto Day, his tree company, and he came and he cut down a redwood tree, a eucalyptus tree, and all these invasive palms and other things that grew along that path. He was willing to take care of all those invasive trees for me, and so he really supported the garden, and I started using him for mulch after that.
Cool.
Sometimes you just build relationships and it happens that way.
Right. That appears to be it on the questions.
Okay.
So.
Well, that wasn't too difficult. But I think the best way to know about the garden is to see the garden. So you can see that it is a habitat and how things grow and what species are there. And because I can't go through every one of them, but yeah, it's a lot to take in one little walk. But it's
anyone
a beautiful
who hasn't
place.
seen the garden really needs to go take a look. It's
beautiful.
Beautiful.
I hope anybody watching will come visit the garden. That would be great. Not that I expect anybody to create this garden somewhere else, but it does give you an idea that it can be done and that we can change our environment by what we plant. And it's certainly changed this landscape.
Right.
It's a whole different place now.
Okay, well, I think we should wind up, and I just want to thank you so much, Rhonda. This was incredibly interesting. I've been to the garden many times, but every time you talk, I learn more things. And, you know, such a successful endeavor. I hope
Yeah, it would
that
be
will
fun to talk
inspire-
about other plants as well, but that's all the time I had, so.
Well, yeah, but you know, my thought is that every year we'll have you give a talk about the garden.
Mhm. Okay.
So, because it's kind of the crown jewel of our chapter, really. That beautiful,
Well, you know,
beautiful garden.
to me, it's sad that our Central Valley doesn't have very many native gardens. There's so few. In the Bay Area and along the coast, there tends to be more native gardens because it's easier to grow a variety of things there than in our heat. But it's doable, and, you know, we need more examples of this in our Central Valley so people realize what they can do. But
Well, I'm hopeful that someday soon, in the next year or two, that we'll actually be able to have a native plant tour for our chapter.
yeah, I think
And,
we should do that.
Yeah. Okay, so Mike, did you have any last things you wanted to say? Oh, remind people that if they want to get the newsletter, or that they should put it in the chat, right?
Well, I think by now they pretty much everybody has gotten a chance to do that. I think it's small enough crowd that pretty much all these people have been through here before. So obvious, I put down my email address. So if anybody wants the newsletter, they can go ahead and send an email to me.
Yeah, and the newsletter has links to all of the rest of the
all the events,
upcoming webinars.
Right.
Yeah,
all the
and
webinars, all the field trips, that in-person thing from the Sierra Club, and all of Rhonda has put in a lot of articles on different subjects. So yeah, there's a lot there.
Okay, thanks to everyone who came, and thanks to both of you. I'm now going to end the recording.
Thank you for the invitation. I enjoyed it. Good night.